The last few days we've been talking about the Akedah, that is the sacrifice of Isaac. And I left out one detail, which I want to share with you now, so it's an introduction to the next piece that I want to tell you about. At the very beginning of the story, on page 101, when Hashem commands Abraham to take Isaac and go to the place of the sacrifice, verse 3 says, Abraham started his day early in the morning, not awoke. We spoke about that it doesn't mean awoke. He started the day early in the morning, and he saddled his donkey. So there's a very famous Rashi here, that when you love something, and you're excited about doing something, and you're very heavily invested in doing something, you don't follow the normal rules of procedure. Abraham was a rich man. He had a great community of people following him, and he had lots of possessions. He didn't have to personally saddle his own donkey. Why did he do it? Because he was going to do the mitzvah that Hashem commanded him, and that was very precious to him. And he wanted to have all of that as his own performance. Maybe a little similar to what happened with Isaac when he wanted to bless Esau, and he told Esau to make him the meal because he wanted him to be the sole origin of the meal so that he could express his honoring his father. Here, Abraham wants the whole performance to be his own performance. And the source that he quotes goes on to say, when Pharaoh, this week's Parsha, chased after the Jewish people after they left Egypt, he arranged his own chariot. That's the same thing. He's an emperor. He doesn't have to arrange his own chariot. But he was very hotly attached to the idea of rectifying his mistake, as the Torah says, letting the Jewish people go, and to chase after them. Now, there are others who criticize Rashi. And they say, when the Tanakh says A did Q, it doesn't always mean that he, with his own hands, performed Q. It could mean that he had Q done. He was the one who ordered it. He was the one who authorized it, but not that he physically carried it out. And they bring a proof from the verse which says that Solomon built the temple. Now, Solomon didn't go to Lebanon and cut down the wood himself. He didn't cast the metal figures. He didn't sew and embroider the drapes and so forth and so on. He was the one who organized it and gave the instructions and provided the means for it. So to say that A did Q doesn't have to mean that A physically did Q on his own. It can mean that he had it done. So therefore, you don't have to go out of your way to say that Abraham did it for himself. And since he did it himself, it shows how much he loved the mitzvah. Or Pharaoh did it himself, it shows how much he was invested in chasing after the Jewish people. No. Abraham had it done by his servant, and Pharaoh had it done by his servant. Can you imagine a way in which Rashi could answer a critic like that? Well, let me comment on another aspect of the style of the Torah, the whole of the Tanakh. It's very, very abbreviated. Very, very important stories are told in 20 sentences, 30 sentences. When you read the story, there are lots of questions you could ask, but the text doesn't provide any answers. So if the text is so abbreviated, then when it puts something in, there must be some importance to that. You must put it in order to teach you something that has significance. If you tell me Abraham saddled his donkey, it just means that he had it done by the by the servants don't tell me at all. Why do I need to know that the donkey was saddled? He took the donkey with him, did have a saddle. It didn't have a saddle, so what? What is that supposed to teach me? So one of Rashi's many principles is that the Torah doesn't say anything unless it's supposed to teach you something significant. And that's why he understands this lesson coming from these words. Are we together? Now, to take that principle along when we look at other passages, especially where Rashi is going to comment on the passages, but for ourselves also, that's an important aspect of understanding what the Torah has to express. Now, I want you to take a look at page 131. This comes after an incident with Isaac being in the area where Avimelech was the king, and he had a certain interaction with him. I'm not going into that interaction at the moment. Verse 12, towards the top of the page. Isaac sowed in that land, and in that year he reaped 100-fold. And I can't resist pointing out the phrase in Hebrew here is Mea Sha'arim. Maybe you've heard of Mea Sha'arim. That's the name of a neighborhood here in Jerusalem. And some people say, well, a sha'ar is a gate, so it must mean the neighborhood of 100 gates. 100 gates. Boy, oh boy. You know, I don't see where you fit 100 gates in. And your tour guide says, well, gates are gates, and he gives you a whole story. But the fact is that the word sha'ar in Hebrew doesn't only mean gates. It can mean measures. Here it says he reaped Mea Sha'arim. He reaped 100 measures of what could have been expected. That's why you translate it. It translates 100-fold. 100 times as much as could have been expected. And that's why they named this neighborhood Mea Sha'arim, because they were giving it a blessing that it should multiply and grow and increase 100-fold. That has nothing to do with 100 gates. Okay. So Isaac had a gigantic blessing from Hashem. Thus had Hashem blessed him, that he got a return on his agricultural investment 100 times more than could be expected. 13, the man became great and kept becoming greater until he was very great. He acquired flocks and herds, many enterprises, and the Philistines envied him. And as I have told you, the break in the English text has no significance whatsoever. The only breaks that are genuine are the ones that are recorded on the Hebrew side. You know, if you look on the Hebrew side, you see it's one block of text. 15, all the wells that his father's servants had dug, the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines stopped up and filled them with earth. And Abimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you have become much mightier than we. And yeah, mightier is not bad. It can mean having more resources. It doesn't have to mean you have bigger muscles. So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and dwelled there, some distance away. And Isaac dug anew the wells of water which they had dug in the days of Abraham his father, and the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham's death, and he called them by the same names his father had called them. End of story. So first of all, we could ask, so what? Isaac lived 180 years. If you will take the sum total of days of his life where the events are portrayed out of 180 years, I don't know, maybe it's 3 months. The vast, vast majority of his life, we have no information about at all. Not in the written Torah anyway. This one story about digging wells and having this interaction with Abimelech seems to be so important that it has to be recorded. But more than that, if you look carefully at the sequence of events that I just read, I think you could see that something seems to be out of order. Start with verse 12, and read all the way to the end of 18, and see if you don't find a verse that when you're reading it and you're thinking of the events that are taking place, There's a verse there which it seems to be fairly obvious to be out of order. Indeed, not only is it out of order, but I think if you had erased it entirely, you wouldn't have lost anything. 13. Okay. 13 just says what 12 said and says it a lot. Okay. Maybe we wouldn't have needed that greater emphasis in that way. 14 enough. The heavy Pharisees envied him. I think you're right. What else? Where else is there a verse that could be erased entirely and you lose nothing?
17. Isaac departed from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar and dwelt there.
Why do we need to know where he went to? Okay.
He's also digging up new wells, so he has to go. There's not all in the same place. So if he's digging all the new well, if he's redigging all the wells, what's the point of him going to this one place if he has to go to all the other places anyway?
Yeah, well, I don't know how far apart they were. I mean, Gerar could be an area, a district, Okay, but it's a fair question. What else? What verse could be erased and lose nothing because what's written in the verse is written twice?
Abraham's the very end. Isaac dug new wells, which they had dug in the days of Abraham, his father, and the Philistines had already stopped up after the death, because he already mentioned that the Philistines had stopped them up.
Yeah. Look at verse 15. 15 says exactly what 18 says. So it's written twice, right? Okay. That would indicate to you one of them is extra. But now which one is the extra one? Would you want to rely on 15 and leave it out of 18? Or would you want to rely on 18 and eliminate 15?
I'd rather have 18.
Say again?
I would eliminate 15. I would rather have it on 18.
You'll eliminate 15. Now, tell me why. Why would you eliminate 15?
18 puts more context around it. The 15 doesn't.
I think you're on the right track. 18 is talking about Isaac digging wells. Oh, okay. And why is he digging wells? Well, because they were stopped up, and the Philistines stopped up, and he's living in his father's wells, and so he's out on the land now. He's not in the city when the agricultural area was where he was before. 18 is all about his new situation and having to dig wells. What's 15 about?
But it mentions his father's servants had dug the wells.
Yes. Says the same thing.
I don't think it says that in 18. It says that Abraham had dug the wells in 18, but it doesn't specify that his servants had done that. So does that mean that Isaac himself dug the wells the second time? Because it seems like Abraham himself didn't dig the wells. He just kind of led the effort. But did Isaac himself lead the effort the second time?
Actually, 18 doesn't say who dug them. It just says they were dug in the days of Abraham, his father. It doesn't say that Abraham dug them.
Oh.
Abraham's just there for the temporal reference.
Okay.
But more than that, think you made a point about context. What is the context of 15?
That the Philistines are mean and filled the wells up.
No. Look at the verse before 15 and the verse after 15. What's going on?
Let's talk about the Philistines.
Well, which ones? The ones he's living among, right? He made a lot of money being in agriculture. And he became much richer than all the ones around him. And they envied him. Okay? And then, time for a news break. 60 years ago, there were wells, and in the time of Abraham, and the Philistines stopped them up. End of news break. Now back to the story. Abimelech says to him, we want you to get out of here because you're too rich. What has the insertion of the wells got to do in the middle of the story of getting rich and being envied and being kicked out? Why stop that story in the middle and talk about the wells? Especially since in 18 you're going to talk about the wells again, and you're going to say that they were stuffed up, and that's why they had to be redug. So 15 is the one that's definitely out of place. It's in the wrong place. Do you hear that in terms of the sequence of events? If you were listening, you'd be confused. Isaac was a farmer. He made a lot of money on the harvest, and it became a lot more money than the Philistines. And 60 years ago, there were wells which the Philistines had stopped up. And Avimelech comes to him and says, because you've got so much money, therefore we want you to leave. So why did you tell me about the wells in the middle? So here, there's another principle. When somebody asks, why did A happen? So you say, because of Q. Q made it happen. Sometimes that will be the end of the story, and sometimes that will just invite, yeah, but why did Q happen? Because Q itself might be just as mysterious as A, and just as much in need of understanding. Why is the door open? Because Peter left it open. Why did Peter leave it open? He knows better than that. He shouldn't have done that. Why did that happen? Whereas, if you say, why is the door open? And somebody says, because the wind blew it open, that's the end of the story. Okay, now you know. There's nothing left to ask. So here, look what the story tells us. Isaac became rich because God blessed him. He became richer than the Philistines among whom he was living. The Philistines envied him, and the Philistines pushed him out. So if you ask, why was he pushed out? Why did he leave? Because they pushed him out. What do you want to ask?
I think I have an answer. For the purpose of 15.
Yeah.
I read the commentary here, but combined with what you said, there's clearly a difference in how they viewed Abraham and Isaac. And going back to the donkey that we were talking about at the beginning, I think that the Philistines might think that the source of the blessing is different, because it looks like Abraham is like the upstart, does everything himself, and Isaac doesn't appear so the same. So even though, of course, Isaac has his own gargantuan struggles, but maybe the purpose of 15 is to emphasize the difference between the two.
Okay, I hear that as a relevant possibility. But I'm driving in a different direction to get a different answer. But okay. Nothing wrong with your answer, I don't think. Let's think again. Remember, I want you to consider a case where something happens and somebody says, "Oh, it happened because of Q," and sometimes you'll say, "Yeah, but why did Q happen?" And sometimes you won't. So the door is open, and I ask, "Why is the door open?" And somebody says, "Peter left it open." That doesn't end my inquiry. Well, why did he leave it open? Whereas if the wind blew it open, so, okay, now I understand why it's open. There's nothing more to ask. Sometimes the because finishes the inquiry. Sometimes the because doesn't finish the inquiry. Okay, now over here, somebody asks, why did Isaac leave? I'll tell you why he left. He left because the Philistines pushed him out. Why did the Philistines push him out? Because the Philistines were envious of him. Why were they envious of him? Because he became suddenly very rich. Oh, it became suddenly. How did that happen? How did he become suddenly very rich? God blessed him. What question do you want to answer now?
By what means did Hashem bless him? Was that through the wells?
What? Oh, okay, you're jumping ahead. The question you want to ask now is, why did God bless him? In particular, why did he bless him now? That also needs to be asked. Especially when you trace an event back to an intelligent agent, I would say very often you want to know, well, what did the agent have in mind? Because an agent could do something for many different reasons. If you don't know which reason it is, you don't really understand what happened. So, this, says Rav Dessler, in his essay on this parsha, this, says Rav Dessler, is the purpose of 15. The purpose of 15 is to tell you why Hashem blessed him to become very great. Hashem blessed him to become very great, to stimulate the envy of the Philistines, to have the Philistines push him out, to have him dig the wells. The whole purpose of the sequence is to get Isaac to dig the wells. That's not obvious, but that's one way to explain what 15 is doing there. In the middle of it, it's telling you, listen, what's motivating the whole sequence is digging the wells. Okay, you hear that? Now you begin to get an answer to what we said at the beginning. Well, the story should be teaching me something important. Wow! HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him a special blessing, a spectacular, miraculous blessing, so as to get him to dig the wells. What is digging the wells? What is that? What does that mean? Well, let's see. Whose wells were they originally? Abraham's wells. Who's Abraham? What does Abraham stand for? What's his place in the world? What did we say when we explained the Akedah? Abraham's quality was loving kindness. Oh, Isaac is digging Abraham's wells. And come to think of it, what is a well? A well is something that gives water. Gives and gives and gives. For nothing. You don't have to pay anything. Just pull it out and use it. Isn't a well an expression of loving kindness? It just gives. So Isaac is digging Abraham, the expression of loving kindness. He's digging his wells, which are an expression of loving kindness, and he calls them by the names that his father called them. Can't you see Isaac stepping into his father's shoes here? This is where Rav Dessler says Isaac gets an attachment to the attribute of loving kindness. Secondary attachment, like we said about Abraham's attachment to strictness and justice and all the rest, but an attachment nonetheless, because here he's stepping into his father's shoes. I must tell you, when I read that essay by Rav Dessler, I realized the hundreds of times that I had read the verses here, I never noticed that 15 was out of order. The minute it's pointed out to you, you think, wow, how could I miss that? And this is a very dramatic portrayal of Isaac picking up some relationship to Abraham's characteristic, just as in the Akedah, Abraham acquires a relationship to Isaac's characteristic. And that gives the double message that Rav Dessler said, that you can't be a one-dimensional person. You can have a certain strength, and you should organize your life principally around your strengths, but not solely around your strengths. You're not permitted to simply ignore other aspects of personality or other aspects of responsibility. I don't know if you ever heard of the Greek playwright Aristophanes. He wrote a play called The Clouds, and it was a satire on Socrates. Socrates, the great thinker, meditator on deep philosophical ideas, but he can't remember where he left his coat, and he can't remember when he's supposed to be home for dinner, and he can't remember his wife's birthday, and he's, like, practically speaking, incompetent. And some people looked at philosophy that way as just being ridiculous. But here's because, in practical terms, he really was incompetent. And the Torah doesn't celebrate that kind of behavior. In addition to having the greatness that you have, the other normal aspects of human life and human responsibility are something that one has to pay attention to. So that's part of the message here. But here's an example of something which seems absolutely trivial and carries a very deep message if you pay very careful attention to the words. Yeah, are we together? Yeah.
Why is it that Isaac was so ostracized, but Joseph later is not ostracized for a similar thing? Like, why didn't I think it's the Philistines, right? Why didn't they say, oh, wow, you know, look at this guy, like he knows agricultural management. We ought to start listening to him. But for Joseph, that is what happened.
That's a very interesting question. Why? I think there's one difference between Joseph and Isaac is that Isaac's wealth came to him individually. Joseph gave advice as to how the country could be a success. The Pharaoh could be a success. Pharaoh like that, making me into a big success. There's going to be a famine, and no one in the world is going to have food except Egypt, because they're going to have a protection against the famine. He's saving the whole country from famine. So he's using his gifts to do something for them. And I should just add, because you asked the question, if you read there also carefully, you could see a certain amount of politics playing its role. It often happened in medieval times that the kings used Jews to institute institute policies that were unpopular. For example, Jews were tax collectors. When you knock at somebody's door and say, fork over, 1,000 rubles, yeah, sure, the emperor living 1,000 miles away is the one who sent him, but he's the one you see. He's the one who's taking your money and putting it in his pocket. And so the king used the Jews as the buffer between them and the people. Here, when the whole time through, whenever the people come to Pharaoh and say, what should we do now? Go to Joseph. He's the one. See, he's the one who set up the taxes during the 7 years of plenty. Well, they didn't mind too much because they had a lot, but he was taking the taxes. The prediction of a famine was public. He made it to Pharaoh sitting on the throne. In good times, times are good. But I want you to know, the commentators say, when he built these store cities and he put away vast amounts of grain to store it for the 7 years of famine, didn't people notice? Didn't people do it for themselves also? And the answer is they did, but it went to rot. Only Joseph's didn't go to rot. So now comes the famine, and they have nothing, and they have to trade all their goods. That's all done through Joseph. Pharaoh says, leave me alone, I'm meditating. Go to Joseph. So Joseph's taking all their money, and Joseph's acquiring them for the crown, of course, for Pharaoh, but Joseph's doing it. Jews are useful that way. But when Joseph's brothers come down, and when Joseph identifies them and reveals himself to them and says, come down to Egypt, and Pharaoh hears about it, that Joseph's family is coming, Pharaoh's very happy. Why is he very happy? And he says, we'll give you the best of everything. Leave all your goods in Canaan. You don't need anything here. I'll give you the best of everything. Well, why is he interested in doing that? Very simple. Joseph is a mystery man. Who is he? Who is he loyal to? What are his real purposes? Nobody knows. He was in jail. He was a Hebrew slave sold to Potiphar. Nobody has a clue who he is. And you have no leverage over him. You have no pressure on him. Let your family come down and listen. I'll support them. So they need me. So they're in my hand. They're under my thumb. You won't dare do anything against me because I have your whole family as hostage. Let them come down. Yeah, I'll give them palaces. Sure. That's why Jacob has Joseph swear that he'll bury him in Canaan, because Jacob knows that Pharaoh won't want him buried in Canaan. Canaan, where's Canaan? You have allegiances in Canaan? You feel connected to Canaan, then you're not loyal here. And indeed, Jacob has Joseph swear that he will do it. And when Joseph asks permission from Pharaoh, he says, my father made me swear. And Pharaoh says, do it as your father made you swear. Meaning, had there not been an oath, he wouldn't have allowed it. But so you can see that Pharaoh is an astute politician, and he understands that it's important to have these people under your thumb. There's a wonderful line by Shakespeare, I think it's in Julius Caesar, where he has his advisors, and Cassius is the one who's leading the revolt and gets him and assassinated, and Caesar says, yon Cassius has a lean and hungry look. I like the man about me to be sleek and fat. Meaning, I provide for them. They depend upon me, and they're living a high lifestyle. Because I give it to them, then they're in my hand. I can get from them what I want, and they'll be loyal. But he looks like he's not taking. He looks like he's not using what he looks like he's cut himself off. I'm afraid of that. He should be afraid of him because he was the one who led the assassination. At any rate, so that's a little bit about what's going on over here. Now, I want to show you another short passage, which also has this kind of very careful reading, which then which then yields a very important insight. Yeah. Look on page 65. Again, I'm quoting Rav Dessler. There was a war. There were 4 kings against 5 kings, and the 4 kings completed a military sweep of the whole area. 4 kings completed a military sweep of the whole area and won the war and took all the spoils, including conquering the city of Sodom, where Abraham's nephew Lot was living. And they took Lot captive. Well, the war's over, and the king of Sodom comes to Abraham. Let's take a look at it inside. This is page 65, verse 21. The king of Sodom said to Avram, "Give me the people and take possessions for yourself." He said, "Listen, Abraham, I'm a king, I don't know how to make shoes. I don't know how to herd cattle. I don't know how to sew clothes. I'm a king. Yeah, but I can't be a king all alone. I need my people. Give me my people so that I can be king. Okay, as far as the possessions are concerned, I'm not asking you about that. But give me the people." Fine. That's his plea to Abraham. 22, Abraham said to the king of Sodom, "I lift up my hand to Hashem, God, the Most High, maker of heaven and earth. If so much as a thread to a shoelace, if I shall take anything from yours, so you shall not say, it is I who made Avram rich. Far from me. I don't want anything of yours. Nothing. Not a penny. I don't want you to say that you made Avram rich." Why does Avram think that the king of Sodom would say that? Where does he get a clue that that would be his attitude? It's in the words. Rav Dessler finds it in the words we just read. The words sound very natural, but if you think of the context, you think the circumstances that we're operating under, certain words that the king of Sodom said are totally out of place. Say again? Good. Very good. Let's see now. What's going on here? The 4 kings made a sweep of the whole area. Winner takes all. They conquered it. It belonged to them. Abraham conquered the 4 kings. So now it all belongs to Abraham. That's why the king of Sodom has to ask for the people from Abraham. Give them to me, because they all belong to Abraham, because he won the war, right? So if that's true, where are the possessions at this point in time? All the material of Sodom, where are they? Doesn't Abraham have control over them also? Abraham's control of them, just like the king of Sodom had to ask for the people, so the king of Sodom would have had to ask for the possessions also, right? Because they're right now in Abraham's hands. So why does he say, take the possessions for yourself? Why does he say take? There's no need for taking. They're already in Abraham's hands. He should have said keep, not take. The word take means they're mine. They aren't. He's lying. He's saying something that isn't true. But the word take means I regard them as mine. I see them as mine. Abraham says, aha. You're telling me that I should take them from myself. That means if I keep possession of them, you're going to look at it as if I took them from you. And then you're going to say that you may be rich. That's where he knows that the king of Sodom would have said that. Is that not unbelievable? Is that not really beautiful? Look at how the words say that. So now the final question is, okay, so what? So this wicked person will say that. Okay, let him go hang himself. What do I care what he says? But Avram doesn't say that. He doesn't say that for two reasons, because, as we've seen now a number of times, he's the breath of loving kindness. Because of the breath of loving kindness, when God says he's going to destroy Sodom, Abraham pleads on their behalf for mercy that God shouldn't destroy them. It's more than that. When Abimelech will say, I made Abraham rich, that's a moral corruption. And Abraham says, I can't have a hand in his moral corruption. I can't play a role in that. I can't be the partial cause of that. I can't do that. And therefore, I'm not going to allow it. But just the difference between take and keep, just that difference already gives it away. You see what's going on? I'm emphasizing this not only for the sake of the lessons that we can learn from this particular item, but to pay attention to words in what you read here, words that people say to you, words that you hear, especially words in the communications, of information and news, where the words are twisted so viciously to make the point that will sell more copy to people who invest in these liars. Okay, so that's and of course he doesn't take now. I think we read a while ago this passage where Avram goes down to Egypt, and Pharaoh takes Sarah into the palace, and then there's a plague on the palace. Before and after, Pharaoh gives a lot of wealth to Abraham. When he goes down, he's poor. When he comes back up, he's rich. Abraham doesn't say, I don't want anything from you. Why not? Indeed, in the case of Pharaoh, if Pharaoh would say he made Abraham rich, it would be true. It would be true. Because he just gave it to him. And it doesn't bother him. So you have to make a distinction somehow between the two. Now, Rashi says that here, in the case of Sodom, it's a blessing from Hashem, and he knew that a blessing from Hashem would not come from war. Which also something to take into mind and to think about. But the Maharal asks, wait a minute, how does Rashi know that the blessing wouldn't come from war? Maybe that's precisely the blessing, that he won the war. You know the famous joke about the flood? There's a flood, the waters are rising, and people are getting out in the last transport, and the guy's sitting there in his house, and they say, better get out, the flood's coming. He says, I believe in God. God will take care of me. Okay, the flood's going up. He's up in the second story already. And they come by with a boat. Listen, no, God will take care of me. Comes to the second story, he's up on the roof. A helicopter comes over, last chance, the waters are coming, it's going up. No, God will take care of me. And the waters rise and he drowns. So he goes before the heavenly court and they say, what happened? I believed in you. And you abandoned me. He says, no. I sent you a truck, and I sent you a boat, I sent you a helicopter. Well, I give you plenty of chances. Why did you think that those weren't coming from me? So why does Abraham think that he's not coming from war? Why not? Why would Rashi say that it's a blessing that wouldn't come from war? And the Maharal doesn't explain why, but it does answer the question that we asked. In the case of Pharaoh, it wasn't war. There was a gift because he was overwhelmed by a plague in the house because of Sarah, and he was guilty, and he wanted to make it up to Abraham. So that's one way to explain it. There's another explanation. When you live in the world, the things you do have an effect on your environment. Yeah, we know about ecology. That's true. That's a physical effect. There are also spiritual effects. And the spiritual effects determine then the spiritual status of the surroundings in which you live. Egypt was no moral, spiritual Garden of Eden. It was decrepit and debased in certain ways. But in the case of Sodom, the crime was so deep that it affected the surroundings in such a way that they couldn't be rehabilitated to be used for anything spiritual. And you have a proof of this because when they were punished, it isn't just that the people died in a plague. No, the whole physical environment was destroyed. Why? Because had they been killed in a plague, other people could have come in and taken over and made use of their materials, and that's not right because the materials were so polluted spiritually that they couldn't be rehabilitated. They couldn't be recovered. In the case of Egypt, it wasn't that drastic. So that's why he didn't. He took from Egypt and he didn't take here. And that shows you that the determining factor for what you do, ultimately, if you're learning the Torah, if you want to try to live according to the Torah, the determining factor of what you do is something that's ultimately spiritual. I'll end this with a piece of halacha that I had to go through personally, and show you how this works. There's a lot more to say about it, but in 1991, both my parents died 6 months apart, so I was in mourning for them for 18 months straight. There's a wonderful collection of laws of mourning, Pnei Baruch, and he raises the following question. One of the things you do when a parent dies is that you lead the prayers whenever you can. Not Shabbos, not holidays, not Hanukkah, but the rest of the time you lead the prayers. Let's suppose you're in a synagogue and there are a lot of people there who are in mourning for their parents. So there's a lot of people who need to lead the prayers. Well, there are 18 weekday prayers a week. Let's suppose there are 18 people, so you get one a week. And let's suppose for some reason or other, you can choose first. Which one of the 18 weekly prayers would you choose to be the one where you can do something for your parent and lead the prayers? So I read the question. I thought to myself, I wonder what I would say. I'd probably say the morning prayer Mondays and Thursdays because then you read the Torah and you have the law, extra Kaddish, and you have nope, wrong answer. The right answer, yeah, what do you want to say?
Isn't that the most immediate one?
No, good try. Good try. It's going to be the same every week. Okay, not a bad thought. Not a bad thought. The right answer, shock, surprise, astonishment, is a night prayer after Shabbos, Motzei Shabbos. Ma'ariv, Motzei Shabbos. Wow, I looked at that and said, why is that? And the answer is this, that on Shabbos, the parent is not being judged. There's no judgment that goes on Shabbos. So Motzei Shabbos, the parent is going back to the condition of being judged. And in that transition, going into judgment, that's when your leading the prayer can do the maximum for the parent. So I thought to myself, wow, that means even though my parent isn't still alive, I'm still connected. I can still do something for my parent. When I do something, it makes a difference. And therefore it makes a difference when I do it. And the secondary choice is Ma'ariv the rest of the week because the judgment is intensified when you go from daylight to darkness. So the best second choice is Ma'ariv any other time during the week. This is a clue to the whole general Jewish attitude. When there's a mitzvah to do, when there's something to interpret or whatever, the real explanation is what's going on up there, not what's going on down here. So, as Rabbi Masman pointed out to me, coming to Purim, when Esther finds out that Mordechai's screaming in the streets, she sends a messenger to ask him, Mazeh ve'al mazeh. Mazeh means, what's going on? And al mazeh is, why is it going on? What does divine providence want from this? Because without knowing that, you don't understand the significance of what's going on. You do need to know the facts. The divine providence is using those facts. You need to know the facts, but if you stop with the facts, you're lost because you don't know what the significance of the facts is. The significance is given in terms of what divine providence wants from it. So it's always a top-down perspective. That's the perspective that gets you the understanding of what's going on. Yeah, you want to ask a question?
When you say judgment is suspended on Shabbos, are you talking about Gehenna or something else?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
What's the textual source for Gehenna being suspended on Shabbos?
I don't even know if it's a verse. I know that it's either a Gemara or a Midrash. It's Chazal that say it, but where it comes from exactly, I don't know. Okay.